Hi again then guys, and welcome to yet another specific car review from the latest batch of vehicles in the 1.13 update. Not the latest update anymore, of course, now that we have 1.14, but unfortunately no new cars for now, not until April at least. This one though is a car which I wasn't really that excited for. In fact, to be honest, I wasn't excited for it at all, because although, as I've mentioned in the past, I love the design of the first Audi R8, which is this one, incidentally, the 4.2 litre V8, and I like this one more than all of the others, the V10, the Plus, all of the endless iterations that they made afterward. I like this one the most. And it's the same reason that I've been discussing a lot in my HSG Top 50 Favourites list. I often like the original base model the most because it's the less cluttered version. It has the pure, simple design. Something like a Koenigsegg, for instance. My favourite is the CC8S. It doesn't have the wings and intakes all over the place. It's just the pure essence of that car's design. For me, Audi has never made this car prettier than right here, the original shape. And this car, as I said, was not exciting me, to be honest. However, that was until I used it, because across the board, even including its specs, this is exactly the same as it was on Gran Turismo 6. Even the price is still 166,000 credits. So, could it be any better? Surely not. It's a car which on Gran Turismo 6 I liked well enough. It was fast in a straight line, but nowhere near as powerful as the V10, and nowhere near as fast either, and nowhere near as popular, incidentally, although I think it was a better car. For one thing, it could have a flat floor, whereas the V10 couldn't. However, now, because of a similar principle to what I talked about with a number of the muscle cars and classics, the car feels better. And that is something which should not be underestimated. It's something which I know most of you guys don't underestimate, but people who aren't as familiar with the previous games in the Gran Turismo franchise can't appreciate it because they haven't played them and they don't know the difference. If GT Sport is your first foray into the series, then you just think it's always been this way, but it really hasn't. This car feels fantastic, and it really is the whole package. There are certain cars, and I'm sure this is the case for many of you as well, they just feel good. You don't necessarily need to love the car, it's just a really enjoyable piece of machinery to use. It has the right proportions, the way it carries itself through corners, the way the weight feels as if it's displaced through the car, the centre of gravity, just the right amount of power, just the right amount of weight, and in some cases the right amount of grip as well, not too much, but not too little. And to me, that perfectly describes what this car is. It's a car which is definitely that little bit more sensible and more, not necessarily upmarket, but definitely more sensible at least, and slightly more understated than its technical brother, the Gallardo from Lamborghini. Shares the same tech underneath, a different engine of course in this form, but it's essentially Audi's version of the Gallardo. However, I always preferred the R8 over the Gallardo, and one of the great things about it now is that it feels more useful than it used to. The PP level on this car never felt quite right to me on Gran Turismo 6, especially with the V10. It was so high and it just couldn't compete at that level. The handling wasn't good enough. In a straight line it was a monster, but through the corners it just wasn't. Whereas now that it's based on power rather than performance points, it could be a lot more useful. Now, one of the first things I did with this car, apart from slapping the livery on it, was tuning it to the peak of N400 and testing it out around Blue Moon Bay to see if this could potentially replace the Porsche 911 for the N400 money-earning method. Now, of course, the KTM is even better anyway, but still, I wanted to know how this compared. Unfortunately, it doesn't compare that well, because although it's actually phenomenal through the corners on that oval track and very easy to use, it's just not quick enough in a straight line. It can't keep up with the cars in the lead, whereas the Porsche and also the Crossbow can very easily. Or at least they don't lose as much distance on the straights, whereas this one does. And that's a shame, because it has a ton of potential. However, carrying that over to a technical circuit such as here, and that comes into full effect. And I have to say, in the N400 category, this might be my best car, or at least my favourite so far. The Porsche was one of my go-to models. This one though is even better, because, as I said earlier, it just feels so well balanced. Now, to give you some kind of perspective on how good this car can be, back when I reviewed the Ford GT, the road version of course, that was in N600, around this same circuit. My best lap in this car, in this replay, is 4 seconds quicker than that Ford GT. And as you can see back in that replay, although I'm not necessarily pushing it to its limit, I'm not going slow in it either. Those aren't parade laps, they're going at speed. So for this to be 4 seconds quicker, and I wasn't even breaking a sweat in this car, that was an easy 4 seconds, but mind you, 2 entire categories lower. Not N600, not N500, N400. Now, to be 4 seconds quicker than a Ford GT under any circumstances gives you an idea of how good the car can be. But to do that 2 classes lower as well, that's remarkable. Now, the car treads a fine line, and it treads it very well, of having all of the advantages that you would want from an all-wheel drive system, but without the disadvantages, because on certain games, such as in the Forza franchise for instance, there's a car, or a couple of cars actually, that I bring up occasionally for Forza 4 or Forza 3 called the Champion Racing Audi RS6, and it's a Pirelli World Challenge touring car based on the Audi RS6. And you can also feel this in the RS6 on Gran Turismo 6 and older Gran Turismo games, where it has a lot of grip, but it also feels, or has a tendency to at least, very heavy over the front end, like it's got too much grip almost, and you need to loosen it up. This car doesn't feel that way. This car feels kind of like what a Porsche 911 Turbo would feel like because of that all-wheel drive system. It's got grip right up until the point that you push it over that boundary when you want to have fun with it. You can easily control this car regardless of the amount of power that it's got. It's incredibly beginner friendly, it's a pleasure to work with, and to top it all off, it looks, of course, better than it used to. It's all about those details, the lighting, etc. But the sound on this car is better as well. It sounds fantastic, whereas on Gran Turismo 6, I didn't find it that memorable. So, as far as I'm concerned, for 167, or close enough, 1,000 credits, it's a difficult one to beat. It actually turned out to be one of my favourites of the 1.13 update, and one of the reasons why, I think, is because I wasn't expecting it. Some of the best surprises you can have are unexpected ones, which is kind of a surprise by definition, but you know what I mean. The cars that you tend to look forward to the most have a higher chance of disappointing you, because you expect so much from them, whereas the cars that you often don't care for, you can be pleasantly surprised by, and that was the case for me. So if you haven't tried out the R8 yet, which is understandable for existing players, maybe you don't want to go back to the well again, give it a try, because it feels a lot better than it did on Gran Turismo 6, and it already wasn't a bad car. So, very pleasantly surprised with this one, and a great car as well. But that's it for this pick. I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.